Om. Om. ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। ॐ श्रीकृष्ण परमात्मने नमः। अथ तृतीयोऽध्यायः कर्मयोगः। श्रीभगवानुवाच ये मे मतमिदं नित्यम् अनुतिष्ठन्ति मानवाः श्रद्धावन्तो न सूयन्तो। Just give me a second. ये मे मतमिदं नित्यम् अनुतिष्ठन्ति मानवाः श्रद्धावन्तो न सूयन्तो मुच्यन्ते तेऽपि कर्मभिः। ये त्वेतदभ्यसूयन्तो नानुतिष्ठन्ति मे मतम् सर्वज्ञानविमूढांस्तान् विद्धि नष्टान चेतसः सदृशं चेष्टते स्वस्याः प्रकृतेर्ज्ञानवानपि प्रकृतिं यान्ति भूतानि निग्रहः किं करिष्यति इन्द्रियस्येन्द्रियस्यार्थे रागद्वेषौ व्यवस्थितौ तयोर्नवशमागच्छेत् तौ ह्यस्य परिपन्थिनौ श्रेयान् स्वधर्मो विगुणः परधर्मात् स्वनुष्ठितात् स्वधर्मे निधनं श्रेयः परधर्मो भयावहः. So we did the 33rd verse. So this was verse number 34 actually.
Yeah, that's correct. 34, I think.
34. We'll just read the 34th shloka one more time. Before that,
Yeah,
we'll talk about the free will. The mandates are addressed only to human beings because they have free will. But here Krishna was saying that each one behaves according to his or her prakriti and nothing can stop it. This came like a big bombshell for Arjuna because he had always thought that he should do something. Now Krishna was saying, no, no, you just go by your prakriti because nothing can stop it anyway. What does this all mean? Here then, there is something that we must understand. And Krishna began his explanation in the next verse. So the seemingly contradictory thing we will actually have to understand rather than be in the state of asuya, saying and finding fault with the teaching of Krishna, saying, oh Krishna, you're giving all these contradictory statements. This is all very confusing. So what needs to be understood is इन्द्रियस्येन्द्रियस्यार्थे रागद्वेषौ व्यवस्थितौ तयोर्न वशमागच्छेत् तौ ह्यस्य परिपन्थिनौ. So इन्द्रियस्य अर्थे रागद्वेषौ व्यवस्थितौ तयोः वशं न आगच्छेत् हि तौ ह्यस्य अस्य परिपन्थिनौ. That is, there is attachment and aversion with reference to every sense object. May one not come under the spell of these two because they are one's enemies. The repetition of the word indriyasya here is an example of a language style used in Sanskrit called vipsa. First, let us take the expression indriyasya arthe, meaning with reference to an object. Arthe of a given sense organ, indriyasya. In other words, a sense object. By repeating the word indriyasya in the phrase indriyasya arthe, the meaning conveyed is with reference to every sense object. The repetition conveys the meaning of every. This verse tells us that with reference to every sense object, there are two factors present, raga and dvesha, likes and dislikes. This verse is the key to everything that has been said thus far. And contains the entire psychology of the Gita. The senses themselves do not have an aversion or an attachment to the sense objects. They are merely reporters. What is said here is that with reference to every sense object, there can be raga or dvesha, or on the part of a human being. Indriyasya arthe ragadveshau vyavastitau. This is a statement of fact. Likes and dislikes are due to Prakriti. With reference to any sense object, sound, shabda, touch, sparsha, form or color, rupa, taste, rasa, or smell, gandha, there are likes and dislikes. Everyone has his or her own likes and dislikes, even the devas. Angels also have their own likes and dislikes. And why are these likes and dislikes present? Because of Prakriti, one's own nature. In this, you have no say at all. This is why, when you tell someone, I love you, and the person asks why, you can only invent an answer. You do not really know why you love a person. Although one can say it is without reason, there is definitely a reason. So if you look into your psyche and ask yourself, what is it that makes you like a particular person? You will find a reason. This is why everyone has a person to like. In fact, he or she has been looking for that person. So many others came before, but not this one. Then suddenly the person appeared, and there was an electrifying experience. All that can be said is that you love someone because of your swabhava, which can be called your subconscious. There is something causing you to love the person. The subconscious is the prakriti, which may be the result of one's own past. If a man has to live his life with a certain woman, or if a woman has to live her life with this man, however miserable the person may be, there will be a liking for the person, and the Lord alone knows why. Being married to and living with another person is no joke. It is something that is definitely going to change the person's life. Both pain and pleasure will be there, depending upon who the person is. And why did you choose this person from among all the other people in the world? You cannot say that the Pizza Hut where you first met was responsible. You have seen many people in the Pizza Hut and nothing happened. If you had not met there, you would have met somewhere else. So, it is not a particular place that is responsible. This particular meeting took place because of something within yourself. That which connects two people in this way is called karma. Shankara says that karma, prarabdha karma, plays a role. Samskaras of dharma and adharma, punya and papa being there in everyone. This is why one person likes another person. In this life, too, from childhood onwards, one picks up a lot of likes and dislikes unknown to oneself. These are all buried in the person's subconscious, and this sub, like a submarine, will also surface. And it always surfaces at the right time. In the previous verse, Krishna said that everyone acts in accordance with his or her own nature. One expresses One expresses one's nature in terms of ragas and dveshas over which no control is possible. In the present verse, in the second line, free will is brought in. Do not come under the spell of these two likes and dislikes. Tayohu vasham na agachet. Krishna did not say, do not have likes and dislikes. Such a statement would have been meaningless. He was simply saying, may you not come under their spell. The logic of the mind. The mind behaves according to its own logic. It is meaningless to tell someone not to entertain a particular thought. The more the person tries not to have this thought, the more he or she will have it. In fact, it may even become an obsession, a fixation. If you try to avoid anything in the name of avoiding it, it is necessarily right there in your mind. For example, if I tell a man that when he chants a particular mantra, he should not think of a monkey. What will happen? Because he wants to follow my advice, before chanting the mantra, he will remember my advice. Don't think of a monkey. In order to avoid thinking of a monkey, he must think of the very thing that he is to avoid, monkey. And after some time, he will not just see one monkey, he will see all the varieties of monkeys he has seen in his life. So if I ask you to think of a monkey, only one monkey will come to mind, one that has previously created an impact on your mind. One person may think of a rhesus monkey or an Indian monkey. Another may think of a chimpanzee or of King Kong. In any event, only one monkey will come to mind. However, if you want to avoid the thought of this particular monkey, you would find any number of monkeys coming one by one, starting with your own monkey, followed by a rhesus monkey, then a chimpanzee, a gorilla, a King Kong, rat monkeys, and a variety of African monkeys. They will all come one by one, all because you want to avoid thinking about a monkey. To tell someone not to think of a particular object is meaningless. This is where free will comes in. The statement, do not come under their spell, tayoho vasham na agachet, implies your will. Problems always arise when we try to avoid the thoughts themselves. Some people spend their lifetime trying to avoid certain thoughts because they are told that some thoughts are good and others are bad. In the process, they remain stuck with the very thoughts they are trying to avoid. In fact, these thoughts have nothing to do with you. They have only to do with Prakriti. So, this is so beautiful. So, rather than avoiding the thoughts, do not come under their spell. Thoughts are inevitable. That is the logic of the mind. Whatever you resist will persist. So, if you say, don't think of this, you will only think of that. So, rather than that, use your free will and not come under their influence. Therefore, what can you do about thoughts? If a commoner happens to see a princess and develops a raga, a desire for her, what is he to do? Because of his status, he cannot even enter the palace, and yet he has a great love for the princess. He can love her all right, but he can hardly proceed on that love. What control do you have over liking a person? None. Nor should you have any control. In fact, you should leave it alone because if you try to control it, you will be in trouble. You will be meddling with your own mind. And when you rub against your mind, you rub against nature. And in this process, you get rubbed too. So, this is not a matter of controlling the mind, it is rather not coming under the influence. Because here in the previous para, Swamiji mentioned that there are some people who spend their entire life avoiding things. That is not true dispassion. So you cannot avoid having certain thoughts. Some of our modern spiritual literature is replete with statements declaring that you should avoid having certain thoughts. There are so many do's and don'ts that a seeker becomes nothing but a pack of nerves. Prior to becoming a seeker, the person was much more acceptable to himself or herself. But after reading so many books, the person finds so much garbage in his or her mind. Because moksha is beyond all concepts of good and bad and beyond concepts themselves. Cultivating and avoiding good and bad thoughts becomes meaningless. All thought is Prakriti. So, this is not a matter of control. This is a matter of understanding. Going beyond concepts of good and bad. No shoulds and should nots. And how is your will involved here? Will is not to determine what you should and should not think, but how far you should go with the thoughts that arise. Your activities are not caused by the likes and dislikes appearing in your mind, but by your identification with them. Because you are identified with your raga dveshas, you go along with them, you being the will. So beautifully explained. So thoughts are inevitable, they will come, whether good thoughts or not so good thoughts. Thoughts that thoughts of like and thoughts of dislike. But what are you supposed to do is your identification with them is what determines whether you go along with them or not. And that you being the free will. The commoner who discovered a love for the princess just leaves his raga alone if he is an intelligent man. That is, if he is a viveki, one who has discrimination. If he is not a viveki, he will go along with his raga and get beaten up in the process. Therefore, allow the raga dveshas to be what they are. The mind is a beautiful instrument as long as you let it think and do not meddle with it. Otherwise, you will be in for problems. It takes very little time to become insane. What is being said here is while you can go by your likes and dislikes, you should make use of your free will to do what is right and avoid you doing what is wrong. This is karma yoga. Do not come under the spell of your raga dveshas, because if you do, they become enemies for you. The raga dveshas themselves do not form the enemies. It is your coming under their spell that turns them into your foes. When you are under the spell of your raga dveshas, you do not do what is to be done, and you do what is not to be done. In this way, raga dveshas become obstacles for you. This means that likes and dislikes are those into whose hands you deliver yourself. It is these raga dveshas that become your obstacles. Such likes and dislikes become binding and therefore enemies. Because they rob away your reason, they are likened to thieves and become your enemies. Tauhi asya paripanthinau. Therefore, without worrying about what happens in the mind, simply go by what is to be done and not to be done. I'll just repeat these last two paragraphs one more time. So, it is not about avoiding thoughts, but it is about deciding with your free will which thought to act upon. And that comes with awareness, that comes with understanding, and that comes with the say you have over your senses. Because it is not the sense objects or the senses that have, no doubt, the objects have come with the pairs of likes and dislikes. Every sense object comes with that tag of like and dislike. But where is that like and dislike happening? It is with you, that free will, and making use of that free will is what is tau. 。 . 。  . 。 . 。 . 。 . . . 。 . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . 。 . . . 。 。 . . 。 . 。 . . 。 . . . 。 . . 。 . 。 . 。 . Tayor navashamagachet. Do not come under this spell. So here the commoner who discovered a love for the princess just leaves his raga alone if he is an intelligent man. So you cannot avoid having certain thoughts. Some of our modern spiritual literature is replete with statements declaring that you should avoid having certain thoughts. There are so many do's and don'ts that a seeker becomes nothing but a pack of nerves. Prior to becoming a seeker, the person was much more acceptable to himself or herself. But after reading so many books, the person finds so much garbage in his or her mind. Because moksha is beyond all concepts of good and bad and beyond concepts themselves. Cultivating and avoiding good and bad thoughts becomes meaningless because all thought is prakriti. So rather than meddling and trying to control the thoughts that come, you have no control over the thoughts that come to your mind because they will come according to your svabhava, according to prakriti. And how is your will involved here? Will is not to determine what you should and should not think, but how far you should go with the thoughts that arise. Your activities are not caused by the likes and dislikes appearing in your mind, but by your identification with them. Because you're identified with your raga dveshas, you go along with them, you being the will. So, in the example, if we take the example of gulab jamun, the gulab jamun is there, and that thought comes, oh, I like gulab jamun and I want to have it. So, there your free will comes in as a, if there is a gap between I like it, I want to have it, and then you act on that and you have it. There, if you have a little gap between I want to have it and the actual action of having it. And that gap is where you exercise your free will. Yes, I like it and I want to have it, but with supposing you're not supposed to have for whatever reason, then that gap comes in and your free will comes in and says, no, I will not have it. And you will walk away. Whereas if there is no free will you're exercising, the want, the like, the moment you saw the object, there is that like that comes in, and then the immediate thought is, I want to have it. And if there's no free will being exercised, there's no viveka being exercised, you will just go follow your want. So because you're identified with your raga dveshas, you go along with them, you being the will. And in this example of this commoner liking having discovered the love for the princess, if he just leaves his raga alone, if he would be an intelligent man if he leaves his raga alone. He's developed a liking for the princess, but then he's just left it there. He's not acted upon the raga. Then he's a viveki, one who has discrimination. If he is not a viveki, he will go along with his raga and get beaten up in the process. If he on the other side, on the other hand, says, no, I want to have the princess, and he goes to whatever extent to fulfill his want, he would be the loser. Therefore, allow the ragadveshas to be what they are. The mind is a beautiful instrument as long as you let it think and do not meddle with it. Otherwise, you will be in for problems. It takes very little time to become insane. ध्यायतो विषयान् पुंसः सङ्गस्तेषूपजायते सङ्गात् सञ्जायते कामः कामात् क्रोधोऽभिजायते क्रोधात् भवति सम्मोहः सम्मोहात् स्मृतिविभ्रमः स्मृतिभ्रंशात् बुद्धिनाशः बुद्धिनाशात् pranashyati. So, to get to that negative spiral and become insane doesn't take a long time. All it takes is for you to become a slave to your raga or dvesha. Binding raga dveshas are the problem. Whereas raga dveshas are natural, they are part of prakriti, they are part of the every sense object in the world comes with that tag of raga and dvesha. So you have no choice over there. But where your free will comes in is not to identify yourself with the raga and dvesha. What is being said here is while you can go by your likes and dislikes, you should make use of your free will to do what is right and avoid what is wrong. This is karma yoga. Do not come under the spell of your raga dveshas, because if you do, they become enemies for you. The raga dveshas themselves do not form the enemies. It is you coming under their spell that turns them into your foes. When you are under the spell of your raga dveshas, you do not do what is to be done, and you do what is not to be done. In this way, raga dveshas become obstacles for you. This means that likes and dislikes are those into whose hands you deliver yourself. It is these raga dveshas that become your obstacles. Such likes and dislikes become binding and therefore enemies. Because they rob away your reason, they are likened to thieves and become your enemies. Tauhi asya paripanthinau. They become your enemies. Therefore, without worrying about what happens in the mind, simply go by what is to be done and not to be done. So, any manana on this before we go for further? So, in the beginning, Swamiji talked about script, you know, people coming under the false notion that they should and should not have certain thoughts. So, thoughts are not the problem. But what is to be done and what is not to be done? Which thought you're going to act upon, which thought you will not act upon. That is the that understanding when one has, then he or she is using his free will as a viveki. And that is how it is with respect to, for instance, anger. You have a situation where you're you're legitimately bound to get angry. But at that point, if there is that gap between you getting angry or remaining silent, if that gap is there, and that gap comes with awareness, and that awareness comes with all the sadhana that we do, all the Sudarshan Kriya and the meditation, that creates that little gap. And when that gap comes, then this knowledge that we've learned, all the 5 points in the happiness course, accept people as they are and do not see intention. So when you don't see an intention, where is that anger? The anger actually transforms into compassion. And therefore, tayoho vasham na agache. Do not come under their spell. Otherwise, they become your own enemies. That is why the beautiful verse in I think chapter 6 is Uddhared Atmanatmanam Natmanam Avasadaye Atmaiva Hyatmano Bandhu Atmaiva Ripuratmana. Your mind is your enemy as well as your friend. Lift your mind by your mind. So, living in this world, raga dveshas are inevitable when you encounter the sense objects. But what is karma yoga? Is not having binding raga dveshas. Oh, if I don't have that, that is it. My life is gone. Or I want to avoid that as far as possible. I do not want it. Either which ways, you're getting bound. So, yeah. So when they become binding raga dveshas, they become your enemies because they rob away your reason. They are likened to thieves and become your enemies. Therefore, without worrying about what happens in the mind, so let the mind be, because the mind has a logic of its own. If you try to resist, it will only persist. So simply go by what is to be done and not to be done. And how does that happen? When you use your free will. Further, Krishna said, Shreyan swadharmo vigunaha paradharmat swanushtitat swadharme nidhanam shreyaha paradharmo bhayavaha. Su anushtitat paradharmat, as compared to the well performed dharma of another, vigunaha, imperfect, swadharmaha, one's own dharma, shreyan, better, swadharme, in one's own dharma, nidhanam, death, shreyaha, is better, paradharmaha, the dharma of another, bhayavaha, is fraught with fear. Another very important but a very controversial shloka that needs to be understood well. Su anushtitat paradharma vigunaha swadharmaha shreyan swadharme nidhanam shreyaha paradharmaha bhayavaha. Better is one's own imperfectly performed dharma than the well performed dharma of another. Death in one's own dharma is better. The dharma of another is fraught with fear. I repeat this. Better is one's own imperfectly performed dharma than the well performed dharma of another. Death in one's own dharma is better. The dharma of another is fraught with fear. We have seen that with reference to sense objects, forms, sounds, smells, tastes, etc., certain objects are looked upon as desirable while others are not. These likes and dislikes arise in your mind in the form of various types of wants for which you are not responsible. It is here that the Shastra comes in. Wherever there is doership and enjoyership centered on free will, wherever free will has access, the Shastra has its sphere of influence. The Shastra deals with dharma and adharma, right and wrong, satya and asatya, satya and mithya, the real and the unreal. All these are dependent on viveka, vichara, discriminative inquiry for the person who is free. Therefore, the Shastra is not deemed to be useless simply because the previous verse declared that each person behaves according to his or her own nature, which cannot be controlled. So I'll repeat these two paras one more time. So, We have seen that with reference to sense objects, forms, sounds, smells, tastes, etc., certain objects are looked upon as desirable while others are not. Every sense object comes with the Raga Dvesha tag. These likes and dislikes arise in your mind in the form of various types of wants for which you are not responsible. It is here that the Shastra comes in. So you do not have a control over the thoughts that come in your mind because they are based on Prakriti and your Swabhava. Wherever there is doership and enjoyership centered on free will, wherever free will has access, the Shastra has its sphere of influence. The Shastra deals with dharma and adharma. So the Shastra is addressing whom? The Shastra is addressing the doer. Shastra is addressing the karta and the bhokta. So for the karta and the bhokta, this Shastra says there is dharma and adharma. So the influence, Shastra's influence is on the karta. So the Shastra deals with dharma and adharma, right and wrong, satya and mithya, the real and the unreal. All these are dependent on viveka vichara, discriminative inquiry for the person who is free. Therefore, the Shastra is not deemed to be useless simply because the previous verse declared that each person behaves according to his or her own nature, which cannot be controlled. So you see, the Shastra does not become useless. It has its say. And what is that? This Prakriti, one's nature, is only with reference to the appearance of raga dveshas in the form of various thoughts arising in your mind. It is true that your swabhava, your nature, is responsible for the appearance of these raga dveshas. But whether you go along with them depends entirely upon you, and that you is your free will. There are always certain governing factors for any course of action. What is proper, what is useful to you, what is feasible, all determine which raga, which like you choose to follow or fulfill. Certain norms of pragmatism and ethics, dharma and adharma, also have to be taken into account. So, wherever there is doership and enjoyership centered on free will, Shastra has its influence. The Shastra talks of dharma and adharma, real and unreal, satya and mithya. And all these are dependent on what? On viveka and vichara. So you cannot uh, discard Shastra as useless simply because in the previous verse it was said that you have no control over the thoughts that come to you. The previous verse declared that each person behaves according to his or her own nature. So this Prakriti, one's nature, is only with reference to the appearance of raga dveshas in the form of various thoughts arising in your mind. It is true that your swabhava, your nature, is responsible for the appearance of these raga dveshas, but whether you go along with them depends entirely upon you. There are always certain governing factors for any course of action. What is proper, what is useful to you, what is feasible, all determine which raga, which like you choose to follow or fulfill. Certain norms of pragmatism and ethics, dharma and adharma, also have to be taken into account. So the thoughts are inevitable. Which one you act upon will depend upon your free will. And that free will with the help of Shastra, which puts up norms, dharma and adharma, will guide you. Therefore, that viveka and vichara is so important. An ethical person need not necessarily be a karma yogi. If there is an awareness of Ishvara in your choice of action, it is karma yoga. Again, if there is an awareness of Ishvara in your choice of action, it is karma yoga. Until then, it is simply the choice of a mature person. It is simply the choice of an ethical person. A mature person is one who has ethics, for which one need not have religion. Bertrand Russell, for example, wrote a book called Why I Am Not a Christian. He never claimed to have any religious leanings and even wrote in so many words that he had nothing to do with such matters. At the same time, this man was a clean person and the first to raise his voice against the proliferation of nuclear weapons. He was a man of great ethics without having any religion. So, an ethical person is not a karma yogi, need not necessarily be a karma yogi. A karma yogi is one who brings in the awareness of Ishvara in his choice of action. Any thinking person understands ethics. Everyone knows what others should and should not do to him or her. Everyone also knows that others expect the same in return. Thus, ethics are born of common sense, not of religion, and can be understood more clearly and assimilated if the person has a certain degree of maturity. One's own One's own experiences in life and understanding are enough to understand what is proper and improper. Thus, no one needs religious scriptures or mandates in order to be an ethical person. Because we saw these are all universal. Dharma are universal values and they're common sense. However, the religious scriptures of the world add something to ethical values. What is that something? They say that if you perform an improper action, you cannot get away with it. You will have to pay for it later. This is where the concepts of punya and papa, merit and demerit, come in. According to the karma performed, there is a certain result that comes to you. It is like a ticket you get from a parking violation, which is not going to be severe as a ticket from a speeding offense. Similarly, according to the karma performed, there is a result called adrishta phala, punya and papa. That there is such a result as adrishta phala is additional information gleaned from the scriptures. But for merely understanding what is ethical and unethical, religion is not required. So religion comes in and adds an additional flavor to the ethical person in that it brings in the concept of punya and papa. For an ethical person, for a person who's just mature and ethical, he or she will go by what is right and what is wrong. That's it. There's nothing beyond that. Whereas when a person becomes religious, religion, the scriptures, the Shastra bring in the concept of adrishta phala. That is, every action has a result, and that result you will have to go through, whether it is good or whether it is not good. Thus, a person can be ethical without being a karma yogi. He or she becomes a karma yogi only when there is an appreciation on the part of the person that Ishvara is the giver of the results of action, karma phaladata. A karma yogi is a bhakta, a devotee, one who does not look upon one's possessions as one's own. For such a person, a physical body is given, a mind is given, the world is given, opportunities are given, resources are given, skills are given, time is given, place is given, everything is given. Given by whom? Given by the karma phaladata Ishvara. Only when one appreciates the given and also the giver behind the given is there karma yoga. Ethically, therefore, one can be clean, but this in itself is not karma yoga, all of which has been pointed out. If what is to be done by you at this time and place and what you want to do happen to concur, then your action is spontaneous and no thinking is required. Also, when what is not to be done is something that you do not want to do, avoidance or withdrawal from such an action is spontaneous. Even if someone asks you to do it, your no is spontaneous because you do not have any such inclination, and also the action is not to be done. So, spontaneity in action comes in when what you want to do and what is to be done becomes the same, and what you do not want to do and what is not to be done also concur. Spontaneous action. Thus, with reference to certain ragas and dveshas, there is spontaneity because you are in harmony with dharma, because you are aligned, your raga dveshas are aligned with dharma. You do not rub up against anything. The laws are not being rubbed against. In fact, you are in harmony with the whole setup. But if your raga dveshas do not conform to right and wrong, dharma and adharma, there is a rub. This is why Lord Krishna also said here, death in your own dharma is better. The dharma of another is fraught with fear. Swadharme nidhanam shreyaha paradharmo bhayavah. The choice you have is only with reference to what you are going to do. You have no choice whatsoever about what happens in your head. Thoughts just happen and you have no control over them. But whether you go along with them or not is definitely subject to choice. Swadharma means what is to be done by oneself, one's own dharma. Dharma meaning karma here. In a society where the duties are very well spelled out, each person knows exactly what is expected of him or her. In the Vedic culture, for example, each of the four groups of people, Varnas, had certain duties which were very clearly defined. For a person of a given Varna who is a student, there are certain duties. Then, as a householder or married person, he or she has a different set of duties. So, too, for a Vanaprastha, one who is preparing for a life of renunciation. So, according to the ashrama you are in, there are certain duties. Although such clearly defined systems no longer operate in the world, one thing is clear. In any given situation, there is a certain response required on your part in terms of action, and this becomes your duty. Duty is not something that you have to be told about by someone, really speaking. It becomes evident as you look at the situation that you are in and understand it as it is. In this way, what is to be done becomes obvious to you. If you do not understand the situation you find yourself in, you can always seek the help of someone in order to understand what your duty is in terms of what you should and should not be done. Someone who is more informed, who has more experience, or who is more capable and placed in such a way that he is able to spell out your duties can do this for you. The concept of Swadharma needs to be seen also in the spirit of this verse. In terms of one's own karma, Swadharma, what is to be done, even if one is destroyed in the process. Doing one's own karma is far better than doing the karma of another person, meaning that it is useless to want to do what someone else is doing. Do only what you have to do. Suppose the goalkeeper in a soccer game decides to run like the other players do, because the ball never seems to come to him anyway. It would be a disaster. In other words, if he decides to do the job of other players, even though it is his job to stand between the posts, it would not work. What is being said here is that if standing between the posts is your job, you had better do it. If the ball does not come to you, it means the other team is not scoring goals. And if it comes too often, you can enjoy the action. It is not as though you are always going to be just standing there. Sometimes there will be some action to perform. Just because the other players run does not mean that you should run. What a beautiful example. Similar to the nut and the bolt that China mentions. Similarly, the job of a bolt, see it's coming here, in a piece of machinery is to sit tight. But suppose the bolt is teased by the piston that says, "Why aren't you doing any action? I'm the only one doing anything here. All you are doing is sitting there tightly. Why don't you just do something?" Hearing this once or twice, the bolt may simply say, "This fellow is just blabbering. My job is to sit tight. That's how my maker, the manufacturer, made me. Therefore, let me ignore what the piston is saying." But eventually, the bolt may think, "Why should I not also move? I think the piston is actually making some sense. After all, I do sit tightly all the time while he keeps going. Should I not also do something? Then he may become my friend. I am also part of the machinery. Why shouldn't I do anything?" Having decided thus, the bolt has to struggle to move because it has been sitting so tightly for a long time. It tries to move one way and cannot. Then it tries to move the other way and begins to shift. Happily, it says, "I'm also doing now. I'm also doing now. I'm also doing now. I am also doing now." Whereupon the bolt falls to the ground. Before any time at all, the piston also falls out and the entire mechanism comes to a standstill. All because of one bolt wanting to do someone else's job. Really, I know it's time for us to move on. So I think we'll take this tomorrow. So any sharing? We'll actually do this verse again tomorrow. Swadharme nidhanam shreyaha paradharmo bhayavaha. So let's think and reflect upon this. Ragadveshas are inevitable. Thoughts are inevitable. But which thought you act upon is exercising your free will. And that has to be according to dharma and adharma. What is right and what is wrong. And not just being an ethical person. Being a karma yogi is understanding that everything you have is given to you. Nothing is your own. Everything is given by the karma phaladata. Your mind, your body, your thoughts, your actions, everything is given by the karma phaladata. But how you want to act, that is your free will. And then doing your job rather than doing your job imperfectly is better than doing the job of another perfectly. That's what we'll take up tomorrow. Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat. Shri Krishnarpanamastu. Jai Gurudev.